Hello ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, I thought I'd go on and give my review of The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, which is the first installment in Peter Jackson's The Hobbit trilogy. Now, let's first talk about the decision to make it a trilogy. I think that's awesome because I've always been a Tolkien fan and a die-hard Peter Jackson fan. I love his original Lord of the Rings film. They're one of my favorite movies ever made. And really, why wouldn't you want more Middle-earth? And so let's get right down to it then. The film was amazing, as far as I'm concerned. I have a few complaints, and I'll get to that later, but let's start off with the acting. Ian McKellen as Gandalf, Richard Armitage as Thorin Oakenshield, and Martin Freeman as a spectacular Bilbo. In every way, they deliver and more than exceed expectations. I mean, you were always knowing that Ian McKellen was going to be amazing as Gandalf, but really, the one that was the odd one out, who I really didn't know, was Richard Armitage as Thorin Oakenshield. Thorin Oakenshield is, of course, the leader of the Company of Dwarfs, and he was outstanding. He stole the whole show. And Martin Freeman is, of course, as you might expect, perfect as Bilbo. Now, for those of you who don't know the story of The Hobbit, you'll have to go and read about it, because I won't waste any time talk about it, because I expect that everyone knows it. And just as you know, from here there will be lots of spoilers, so if you don't like that kind of thing, you should end your viewing now. Last warning. Okay, here the spoilers comes. Now, let's talk about one of the main complaints that many of my friends have, which was the CGI. Many of the characters in the movie were computer-generated characters. Now, of course, in the Lord of the Rings film, many characters were actors in makeup and costume. That is not the case in The Hobbit. Of course, there are some actors in makeup and costume. Actually, one of the orcs that chases the dwarves and Bilbo from the Trollshaws are actually in makeup, and some are CGI, but the main antagonist, aside from Smaug, who's really not in the movie except for a short glimpse at the start, is of course Atzog. And Atzog, he's completely CG generated. There's of course an actor doing his voice, and I suppose like Gollum, there's some facial work that goes into it, but really he's all CGI, there's no mask. But still, I felt he had weight, and I felt he was one of the best characters in it, and I find him completely frightening, and I found him to be a completely legitimate antagonist who you sincerely believe is there, and I really loved him. And the climax of the movie, okay, huge spoiler, when Thorin Oakenshield rises up from that big tree, and there's fire all around him, and he looks at Zog in the eye like, "You're dying now, bitch." I completely love that moment. That's my favorite moment in the scene, or in the movie. Sorry, in the movie. Totally my favorite, incredibly epic moment. And the trolls also are completely CGI, and they look stunning. I love that scene. They're exactly how I imagined them from reading the book. And maybe everything except for the goblins were how I imagined it when I read the book. The goblin scene, I mean, there's great action with the goblins, and there's great, there's a feeling like they're this huge kind of insect swarm, like just like in Moria. But I feel that they're trying to, some ways with the camera angles and everything, recreate that Moria feeling of a fellowship running from a huge swarm of insect-like creatures. And the Goblin King, a bit disappointing actually. I am. It was a cool piece of characteristic, and I didn't say it was bad. I loved the movie, and I thought that also was awesome, but it wasn't as awesome as it could have been. I'm just saying it could have been more awesome. And that's perhaps my only complaint about the movie, that the Goblin King was a bit disappointing. And another thing is, not all of the dwarves get to say something important or say something at all sometimes. But then again, that was how it was in the book, and there's 13 of them, and there's 2 more movies, so we'll have to just wait and see, I guess. Now, the thing on everyone's mind is I saw it in 3D and 48 frames per second. My eyes hurt a little from it. I had to take off the glasses and like just blink like 2 times, but I loved it. It was so immersive, and you like felt you were looking into the real world. It was like Peter Jackson has said, like a hole has been cut out in the cinema, and you're actually looking into the real world. It was amazing, and 3D combined with that, it just felt so incredible, so real. I loved it, and the sound design, oh god, and the soundtrack and everything. I loved it, and I mean, this film is obviously made for the fans. The fans will love it, and maybe some others will go away scratching their heads because it is hard to grasp if you're not in love with these characters. Everything is hard to grasp about Lord of the Rings if you're not totally in love with them. But you know, some fans, like my girlfriend, who isn't a die-hard fan, she loved it too, and I just think it's more 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 like user friendly towards those who aren't dire Lord of the Rings fans, unlike the Lord of the Rings movies, which are just huge epics. And that's another thing, you can't compare these two movies because they are two different stories. The Hobbit is from the beginning like a cotton candy children's novel, who Peter Jackson has with material from The Return of the King, appendix. He has expanded it and added things that actually make sense within the movie and consists within that timeline. But they've made it beefier and more gory and everything. So yeah, it's a totally different story, but it's not The Lord of the Rings. And of course, you won't get the same emotional depth that you got in The Lord of the Rings. There's some emotional moments and some moments with depth when like Galadriel and Gandalf speak, and when Bilbo is about to kill Gollum, but he doesn't, and that's referenced later in the Lord of the Rings movies. That's great emotion and incredible moments, and at the end when Thorin finally shows some respect for Bilbo and some love for him, that's also an incredible emotional moment. But you have to realize there's two other movies. This movie is just a setup. I mean, they're gonna blow our minds in the other two. They already blew mine, so. But I think it's gonna get much bigger in the other two. I mean, we saw the battle outside of Moria, and that was in the flashback that when Balin told the story. That was amazing, and I can't wait to see more things like that in the coming films. And speaking of Balin, I thought that character was amazing. That was one of the dwarves who really stood out to me, and that actor really realized Balin very well. So yeah, what's there more to say here? Um, I mean, you can't capture lightning in the bottle twice, and yeah, when I see the trailer, Radagast the Brown, Radagast the Brown. Many have complained that he's like the Jar Jar Binks of Middle Earth, but I really have to say, he's incredible, and I loved him. He is a bit goofy, but he made me laugh, and he also had some serious wizard moments when he like went like badass wizard and like healed that hedgehog, and I love that, and also Gollum. The Riddles in the Dark scene is by far one of the best piece of characteristics in the movie, and it's great to finally see that realized. Because I remember reading about it as a child and like imagining it in my head, and you know, that scene is just pure gold. That's one of the best scenes in the entire movie, and the CGI is amazing. It's like Gollum is there, like he's actually there. You can't tell the difference between Bilbo and Gollum in that shot. And they really play on that like split personality thing, the Smeagol Gollum thing, and it really works out. And with the soundtrack too in that scene, it switches between quite sometimes fun and more humoristic music and dialogue, and other times really sinister and dark and evil music and dialogue. Like when and the desperation in Gollum's expressions and his way of moving and talking when he finds out the ring is lost. He's like, you feel that dude's. It's like his wife from like 40 years relationship has left him, and when he turns around and like, what's this Jordan, it's an little Perkinses, and he's like, you can see that's one angry motherfucker, and I just love that. I love that scene. It was incredible. And yeah, so The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey will surely please fans, and it absolutely pleased me. And the only bad thing about it is I can't. It's that we have to wait so long for the next installment of the trilogy. There's some songs in there too, and I love that. There's some references to the book, like different chapters and different lines, like how Gandalf and Bilbo say hello, and things like that, which I really love. And yeah, I mean, you can't capture Lord of the Rings twice, and this isn't Lord of the Rings. It isn't meant to be. That isn't Peter Jackson's goal to remake Lord of the Rings. He just wants to make something that will please fans and that will, you know, live up to The Hobbit, which is just a cotton candy children's novel in the beginning. And so yeah, you'll love it if you're a fan of the book and Lord of the Rings in general. Some great characters, some great moments, and overall I just find it to be really enjoyable. See it in 48 frames per second. I really recommend that. Great viewing. So The Hobbit and an Unexpected Journey by Peter Jackson gets an 11 out of 10 from me. Thank you very much.